Thank you, Graham. It's great to be here and to hear what I believe is more like a sort of 21st century phenomenon of using social sciences to advance animal welfare science and change human behaviour. Our story is very much a learning curve. We're quite unusual in terms of animal welfare science. I think perhaps we're lagging a bit behind the other fields of animal welfare in this respect. So certainly from my own perspective, it's been quite a steep learning curve. I'm going to quickly go through all these areas today, focusing mostly on our new innovation project, the Grassroots Network and Innovation. So we've been working in a traditional context whereby knowledge transfer has been top-down. Scientists have done some research, found the answers, told the farming community, and advisors have helped to spread this message. This does work pretty well for some of the simpler issues like dietary requirements, ventilation, and things like that, because there's a direct and fairly simple link with productivity, and it becomes a no-brainer for the farming community to take them on board because it affects the bottom line and it's easy to do. So the culture that has arisen is that farmers and advisors and their vets have become used to this top-down model. They've become used to the do this and it will work situation. But we found that when you come to much more complex welfare issues, this approach simply doesn't work, in part because we don't have the answers and it isn't simple. So I'm using feather pecking as a model in this talk because it is very widespread. It may surprise those of you who think that free range is the sort of gold standard for welfare, that feather pecking, disease, and other issues are very widespread and they cause extremely high mortality, which to me is a very big concern. But feather pecking is a complex issue. It's been researched for over half a century. We still haven't actually found the answers. We don't fully understand. But we've learnt a lot through this research. And we understand quite a lot of the internal and external factors. And we've teased out some of the risk factors. But even with that context, it's very frustrating for farmers that they can do much the same things with one flock and it will work, and with another flock it won't. A problem suddenly arises. So it becomes very easy for the industry and everyone associated just to accept this status quo, rather like the brachycephalic dogs. You know, dogs puff and pant, that's what those sort of dogs do. Hens lose feathers during lay, that's inevitable. And it's easy for farmers to shift the responsibility and say it's all down to the genetics. You know, we get supplied with a bird that we can't manage. So we set up a project to see whether applying the science that we did know would actually make a difference. So right from the start, we engaged the help of industry, farmers, advisors, all sorts of stakeholders, to choose things that were being used on farms or that were practical and would likely make a difference. So we wanted to know that if we systematically monitored these and put them into practice, would it make a difference? The aim was to move from having flocks looking like the ones on the top left to ones looking like the ones on the bottom right. These are probably extreme examples. Most flocks are somewhere in between. But the short answer to that question is yes, it did make a difference. If people adopted more of these strategies, then there was an improvement in hen behaviour and in feather cover, reduce mortality. But importantly, from our perspective, we were able to make a difference. We were able to facilitate the behaviour change and get these things translated into actions that in themselves did make a difference. But our facilitation changed over time, over the course of the project. We were informed by other projects going on at the same time. And we moved from the traditional sort of top-down model to much better approaches. We had straplines working together, and very importantly, we recognised and celebrated the good things that farmers were already doing. And that was very encouraging to them, and it encouraged them to go that extra step. And we started illustrating our reports, showing how other farmers were doing it. And on a one-to-one tailored approach, we tried to encourage ownership, whereby the farmer or stockman decided which things they wanted to do and how they wanted to do them. We very much fostered a team spirit, and we moved wherever possible to positive language, positive goals, positive messages. And we also embraced a whole range of communication. Apart from our tailored one-to-one approach, we were using website, small leaflets, booklets, producer groups, talks, all sorts of methods of communicating so that they appealed to the different learning styles of those engaging in the project. And as other people have mentioned in several of the talks, humour is very important in getting across the message and achieving a nice, positive, happy atmosphere. So in terms of some of the things that we've learned along the way in facilitating change, working towards common goals, sharing best practice, enabling choice, encouraging ownership, and having farmer-led ideas, this is something that we're particularly working on in Innovation, has been very helpful in going back to some of the farmers who participated in this work and getting their opinions on the whole process. We found that time and hassle were particular barriers to change. And so we came up with all sorts of ways of making things easier for them, saving them time by finding out things, finding out suppliers, sometimes actually producing things for them, going on farm, helping them tie up bits of string, providing some of the equipment they needed in order to manage the risks. I won't go through this list because these are all things that have been mentioned in other talks, but in terms of embedding practice, there can be a sort of variety of both carrot and stick approaches, and all have their place and can be effective in embedding the behaviour change. But it's always better if this has come about in a more positive and person-centred approach in the first place. Then moving on now to our Innovation project. This is an EU funded, it was one of the first in the Horizon 2020 series, which has a sort of sustainability theme to it. So it's not necessarily animal welfare science, but we've chosen to use that as a model. We've now actually got 16 groups that we're working with. We carefully chose a range of countries geographically, but importantly in terms of their social structure and culture. So, for example, we've got the Czech Republic and Spain working with us, and in both these countries, over 90% of the hens are kept in cages, and there's very much a sort of integrated top-down management approach. and farmers have tended not to have a voice and tended not to get together in groups. There's no sort of culture of producer groups. Whereas in the UK, this is quite common. And in the Netherlands, they've been with stable schools and all sorts of things. They've been trying out this approach for quite some time. They're pretty much pioneers in it. And to the point that some of the farmers are sort of saying, been there, done that, got the T-shirt, we're sick of engaging with these sorts of projects. So we've got social scientists who are monitoring this whole process, looking at the different cultures, the different topics, the different attitudes of people. They're sort of monitoring this whole new way of working. Like I said, we started off with the idea of working with sort of feather pecking, but we've given the groups total freedom to choose what topic matters to them, what's important to their industry. And interestingly, at least 3 groups have come up with working with red mite as their topic that's of importance to them. So that does sort of indicate that it is grassroots-led and we aren't forcing things on them, we're just merely facilitating. So they're working on that. In the UK, I'm working more with a wider group of stakeholders looking at end-of-lay transport. We're looking at improved ways of catching birds rather than pulling them out of cages into bunches in each hand and walking the length of a colossal house, possibly bashing them on something on the way. We're looking to improve both the catcher welfare and the bird welfare and to put them straight into their transport containers right by the cage without inverting them and handling them individually. But it's been very important for us in doing this. We brainstorm good ideas, but then we immediately get on board some of the people who do this day to day as their job, the people who know how to handle hens, what will work, what won't work, what the people who catch them will be able to cope with in terms of change. And it's been very important for us to actually physically get out and play around with bits of equipment and get a real feel for what's going to work and what's not. So like everybody else, we're hoping in this project we'll empower networks to become self-sustaining at the end of the project. And we're also hoping that this grassroots model is going to be useful in other contexts with other livestock species. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see to what extent along the sort of innovation curve or spiral we can get in the different cultures with the different groups of people. So in conclusion, going back particularly to my feather pecking case study, you don't actually have to know everything in advance to be able to act and to make a difference. We're finding it hugely valuable to develop networks that so increases your capacity, as we found ourselves yesterday. You know, we can't know everything, and no individual person can, but by pooling and sharing this knowledge, you can make really big steps forward. And I think it's been very important for farmers to recognise that they often are the experts. They have the knowledge, and it's up to them to be proactive about it and to learn how to get help when they need it, rather than rely on other people always telling them what to do. And we've recognised, as has been said by other people, that there's not a one-size-fits-all, both in terms of facilitating behaviour change, but also undertaking the behaviour change itself. So I'd like very much to acknowledge the various sources of funding that have enabled us to make this journey. And many, many colleagues, not just those named who've been particularly involved in the chicken work, but others working on parallel projects. And we've been lucky. We've had huge support from industry and the stakeholders, and very engaged and enthusiastic farmers. And there's all sorts of initiatives going forward, not just the ones that I've described. So thank you very much.